We're about to play you an interview we did with U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, 2 days ago in Israel. In general, it's never worth talking about the backstory behind an interview. It's kind of not the point. It makes it about the interviewer, not the person being interviewed. For one thing. For another, it's not that interesting most of the time. And for another, it's kind of off the record. You know, the other person hasn't consented to you telling the story. So in general, we don't do that. Who'd want to hear that? Let the interview speak for itself. But in this case, we want to tell you just a few things about how this interview came about, because they are pretty interesting, revealing, and now weirdly relevant, apparently. So this interview with Mike Huckabee came about a couple of weeks ago on Twitter. One of our producers showed me. He said something to the effect of, "You're talking to Middle Eastern Christians, Tucker Carlson. Maybe you should talk to me. Why don't you come do an interview?" And I paused for a minute. I've thought in the past about trying to interview Mike Huckabee, whom I've known for over 30 years and worked adjacent to at Fox. And I had mixed feelings about it, mostly because it's hard, if you're me, to interview Mike Huckabee because of just the personal affect. Mike Huckabee is jovial, comes off as friendly. He's a grandfather. When annoyed, I can be nasty in interviews. And so it takes a lot of self-control to interview someone like Mike Huckabee, not because I hate him, but because it's hard to ask him tough questions and not come off as a jerk, which I often am. So, but I thought in this case, yeah, I should definitely do this for a bunch of different reasons. Mainly, the United States is moving toward a big war, a real war with Iran, a regime change war. The biggest war we've had since the invasion of Iraq in the spring of 2003. And Israel is driving that. We are doing this at the behest, at the demand of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So it seems like now is the time for more Americans to understand the dynamic between the U.S. and Israel and to call attention to that. And for another, Huckabee's behavior in the last year in Jerusalem as the ambassador has been very, very striking. He famously had a meeting with the most damaging spy in American history. And why did he do that? He hadn't been asked by anybody up until 2 days ago, why did you do that? So I wanted to be able to ask him that. And so we accepted, and then began the usual negotiations about when and where the interview would take place. And we were constrained because we weren't expecting this. We wanted to do it quickly, but we had tons of travel. So we threw them a date, them being the American embassy. We can do it on this date. And they were very accommodating. And then the question became, well, where do we do it? And maybe a Christian holy site. We said, we've got to get in and out really quick, got to be back to do a bunch of other interviews, but we've got this time frame. They said, well, why don't you do it at the U.S. Embassy? Or maybe we said that. Great, U.S. Embassy. So the U.S. Embassy is about an hour, 55 minutes from the big airport in Israel, Ben Gurion. So we said, okay, what about security? Now, at this time, the Israeli government, the prime minister included, were attacking me in this show. Netanyahu suggested I was a Nazi, for example. And so we thought, how about security? Obviously. Not because the Israeli government necessarily would do something bad, because there are a lot of people in Israel who think, because they've been told, that I'm an anti-Semite or a Nazi or want to kill Jews. It's kind of crazy overstatement. All untrue, obviously, but it would be good to have security. And I should say, having done interviews on 6 out of 7 continents over 35 years, I'm not very security conscious at all. Never really feel uncomfortable, but this seemed like a prudent thing to do. So we were told by the embassy spokesman, no, we're not going to provide security. And so we said, okay, I guess we'll get private security. But could we get someone from the embassy to ride in the car with us from the airport to the interview? And we were told, no. Could we get what they call a control officer, just an American, with us in an official capacity as an embassy employee with us? No, quote, for legal reasons, we can't do that. So I thought, well, that's very strange. And then they said, but instead, we're turning you over to the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, MFA, and they're going to arrange everything in Israel. Well, this was within 24 hours of the Deputy Foreign Minister, Sharon Haskell, releasing a video calling me an anti-Semite and an enemy of Israel. This was the person who the embassy was telling us was going to handle all of our travel. So it was at this point that I just called. I called the spokesman for the U.S. Embassy in Israel, and I said, okay, I'm an American citizen responding to an invitation from the American ambassador to Israel. And by the way, I'm the son of a U.S. ambassador, so I have some sense, not an expert, obviously, but I have some sense of how this works. And I think that the U.S. ambassador has discretion to send somebody from his office to the airport to accompany someone in. I think that's right. And if it's not right, tell me what law you're talking about, what legal reason you're talking about that would prevent that. And now you're sending me over to a government official who's been calling me a Nazi? That's the person in charge of getting us to the embassy? Like, what is going on here? And the embassy spokesman, who's totally nice, said, well, this was the decision of someone called David Brownstein. He's the DCM, the number 2 guy in the embassy. And I said, well, put him on a text exchange. Like, what is going on here? And so Brownstein got on and didn't answer the question, but basically said, well, okay, let's just do the interview at the airport in the diplomatic reception area at the airport. Okay, I said, we're going to be flying in from Europe, and we had to be in and out really quickly. So at great expense, we chartered a plane, which I never do because I'm cheap. But we did. And so then I said to them, okay, I want to send you the flight information, tail number, flight number, route, and I want you to pass that on to the Israeli military just so, you know, they don't mistake us for an Iranian drone or something. I mean, not to be paranoid, but again, this is probably the most violent country in the world, Israel. Is there a country in the world where a higher percentage of the population has held a gun or shot someone? I mean, I don't know the answer, but this is a country famously waging a 7-front war with all of its neighbors, you know, so this is also the country that bombed the USS Liberty, knowing, we know this from NSA intercepts, that it was an American ship. So don't, you know, just send the military our flight information and, you know, we can all just sort of know it's on the record and we can all calm down a little bit. No, they said. The U.S. Embassy said, no, this is, your flight is not a matter of concern to the Israeli military. I said, okay, now you're making me uncomfortable. Isn't the airspace of Israel the purview of the Israeli military? Aren't they in charge of maintaining the integrity of their airspace? When you fly over the country of Israel or any country, its military keeps track of you because that's their job. So why wouldn't you send our flight information to the Israeli military? You're making me nervous. I sent this exchange. I took a screenshot of it and sent it to a bunch of people, including in the U.S. government, because I'm not a paranoid person and I'm not a jumpy person. I said, is this weird behavior? Yeah, it's really weird behavior. All of them said that. So I got pretty aggressive and just said, look, you got to do this. Okay. And they, to their credit, got back to us and said, yes, we will do that. But I just thought that was completely bizarre and menacing, by the way. Now, at the same time, and I think this is relevant, certainly it goes to motive, I was attempting to set up a meeting, as I have been for the past 3 months, with the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, who I've dealt with a lot in the past, and who denounced me as a Nazi in public, a member of the woke Reich. And why was I trying to do that? Not an interview. I knew he wouldn't sit for an interview, but I wanted just to meet with him in person. One, to show that I'm willing to go to Israel. I don't hate Israel as a country. But two, just to say directly to him, this is bad. This should be de-escalated. This kind of rhetoric doesn't help anybody. Calling me specifically, a Nazi and an anti-Semite when you know that I'm not. By the way, if I was, I would just admit it. I've said many times I think anti-Semitism is immoral. It's against my religion, just as hating any group on the basis of their bloodline is immoral. So the new year is here, but that does not mean you've got to overhaul your whole life, despite claims to the contrary. You don't have to take drastic measures. Make a few changes here and there, and you'll be a lot better off. And you can start with the snacks in your pantry. Now, products from standard American chip brands are, let's be honest, pretty repulsive, filled with chemicals that make you feel heavy and bloated. They don't even taste that good. They're not good for you. We recommend an upgrade with Masa chips. Masa is the easiest way to eat clean without feeling like you're on a diet. The chips contain 3 ingredients. That's it. Organic corn, sea salt, 100% grass-fed beef tallow, and that is it. No seed oils, no mystery chemicals, just food, actual food. And they're amazing, and you feel great after. You don't feel weighed down. We particularly enjoyed the Cobanero flavor lately, but they're all great. You want to give them a try? Visit masachips.com, M-A-S-A, chips.com/Tucker. Use the code Tucker for 25% off your first order, or you can click the link in the video description, or you can scan the QR code to claim this outstanding offer. And so I really pushed hard for this meeting, and I called a lot of people who know him and who are in regular contact with him. In fact, I went to go see some of those people directly. Please, can you help me get a sit down for 5 minutes with Benjamin Netanyahu? And I probably called or met with 6, 7, 8, maybe more people on this question. People in official capacities, people in the Israeli government. I know a number of people in the Israeli government, people in Israel, a friend of mine in California who knows him. I mean, I really, really tried. And I did so for 2 reasons. One, because there was a threat to my family. The Israeli government and Netanyahu himself tried to punish 2 members of my family. I won't be more specific, but actually punish 2 members of my family because he has said in public many times, believes in blood guilt. Amalek, when someone commits a crime against you, you punish not just him, but his family, his bloodline. There's no idea that's less Western than that, more anti-Christian than that. Christians reject that. Netanyahu doesn't. That's why he's talking about Amalek. And he was going after my family, literally. So I felt very threatened by that. But moreover, I think it's bad for my country to have people using that kind of language. Round them up, bring them to the camps, gas chambers, Nazis, anti-Semitism. It scares the heck out of people. It makes people crazy and hysterical. And certainly in my case, none of that is true. I hate collective punishment. I hate attacking people on the basis of their bloodline. I hate anti-Semitism and anti-white racism and all of this, or any kind of racism, period. And I've said that a lot. So using that kind of language against someone who is not fundamentally your enemy, who just, in my case, I want Christians in areas controlled by Israel to be treated with dignity, to have rights. And I don't want the U.S. government involved in a war, a regime change war with Iran. Those are my priorities, and I've said them out loud. I have no secret agenda. So to attack me as a Nazi for saying that suggests a total unwillingness to compromise. Anyone who doesn't agree with us 100% must be destroyed. His family must be attacked, my family, and must be written off as a Nazi. Well, when you do that, it makes people hysterical. It increases the temperature to a point that, someone's going to get hurt if you keep talking that way. And it's just bad. It's bad for the United States. It's bad for the world. So I wanted to deliver that message. I finally wound up talking to a guy called Yoram Hazony, who is an Israeli who famously organizes the American National Conservatism conferences. And I said to him, look, you're having a National Conservatism conference in Jerusalem this summer. You asked me to speak at the first National Conservatism conference in the United States, and I did. Obviously, I believe in national conservatism, America first. I think every nation should put its own people first. That's why you have governments. And I would like to speak at this one. And moreover, I would like you to ask your friend Benjamin Netanyahu to meet with me. And we had this sort of long back and forth, and it was, no, you cannot speak at the National Conservatism Conference because you're an anti-Semite. No, I'm not, I said. Yes, you are, he said. And I said, well, I really would like to speak to Bibi to kind of de-escalate this. And he said, it would not be in his political interest to meet with you. That's almost verbatim what he said. Therefore, no. So then I realized, you're dealing with people who are unreasonable, who are inflexible, who are in fact fanatical. And then add to that, of course, that my tax dollars are paying them. It was all pretty distressing. So that was the backdrop behind our very brief and highly intense trip to Israel. So we show up on Wednesday, fly in from Europe, again at great expense, and show up at the diplomatic terminal at Ben Gurion Airport where this interview is going to take place, which is bizarre in itself. A filthy building. The windows are so dirty in the terminal you can't see out them barely. There's like exposed drywall. The whole thing is depressing and grim. There's litter outside. Like, what is this? This is the diplomatic terminal in Israel. I thought that was very strange. Having been in a lot of diplomatic terminals, I've never seen a rattier one. We go in, And Huckabee's there. And of course, he's totally friendly, as he always is. Very, very friendly guy and cheerful. And we sort of chat. And the whole place is filled with these guys in T-shirts, thuggish looking guys in T-shirts who are some kind of security. So we do the interview. You're about to watch it. It's very long, at 2.5 hours ish. And I try my hardest to be friendly. I think I kind of succeeded. You can judge for yourself. But I really got the sense, and again, you can decide as you watch it, that Huckabee was not able to answer any of the questions, but also not really in charge. You really got the feeling of a guy sort of trying his best to repeat the talking points, but very constrained, like unable to say certain things, not because those things might harm the interests of the U.S. government. He was happy to attack, for example, the U.S. military and say they're more brutal than the Israeli military. Okay. But unwilling to say certain things because they might reflect poorly on the Israeli government. And you sort of thinking about this for a second, you're like, wait, you're the U.S. ambassador. You're our representative to a foreign country. Why is your red line criticism of that country? Shouldn't you be representing us? And it was very obvious he was representing the Israelis. Obvious. And again, you can judge for yourself. But anyway, so we do this interview. It was cordial. And at the end, we're set to fly out. We have a time. We have to get out. And the plane is sitting right outside. And we're ready to go. And for some reason, the Israelis still have our passports. There are 5 of us there. And 4 of us are flying out on this plane. One's flying out commercial with our gear. So my business partner and I, we're standing there. We've never left the airport, never went anywhere. But our 2 producers have spent the night before in Tel Aviv. And they're called into rooms and given the 3rd degree. Now, keep in mind, they're about to get on a plane and leave. In fact, we're late. We have to get out of there. We have a slot to get out. And security, whoever this is, won't let them go. So I don't really know what's going on at this point. I'm like, where are our guys? We got to get out of here. So one of them comes out and he says, that was the weirdest experience in my life. They asked me questions about the interview. Who did you speak to? Keep in mind, this was like 8 feet from where we did the interview. Well, the U.S. ambassador. I'm like, Huckabee, what did you talk about? Why did you ask those questions? Was it a hostile interview? And of course, everything in the diplomatic terminal is taped. Everything in Israel is taped. It's a police state. It's a surveillance state, obviously. You go to Israel, they put software on your phone. Everybody knows this. Okay, they're constantly spying on you more than probably any other country. And so they know the answers to these questions. But they're asking my producer, like, where do you work? How many people work there? Do you go to the office? Where is the office? What are their names? They're doing like an intel op and humiliation exercise on my producer. This isn't security. We're leaving right now. And they're holding his passport. The interrogator is holding the passport in his hand as he's asking these questions. So he's telling me this. And I said, this is the most outrageous thing I've ever heard. Huckabee's gone by this point. You're an American citizen who's just had a conversation with the U.S. ambassador, and some thug is demanding details of that conversation. I hope you didn't answer. And he's like, no, I didn't. I don't know what to say. Meanwhile, our last guy, the youngest man who was traveling with us, our last producer, is still in a room being questioned. So I pull over one of the guys and said, we got to get out of here. So I don't know what this is about. It's outrageous. And, there's nothing I can do about this point, but we got to go. And this woman comes up to me and says, look, let's just go. We're going to bring you to the plane and he'll come later. I said, no, it's my producer. He's being interrogated, asked totally over the top, fully inappropriate questions that have nothing to do with security at all. Pull up your website, show us your text exchanges with other people on your staff. What are your politics like? And again, what did you say to the U.S. ambassador and what did he say back to you? Those are not relevant questions if you're trying to keep your country secure. Those are intel questions. And they're over the top. And I said, I want this guy out now. Let's go. We got to go. And they said, no, just leave him here. We'll bring him to the plane later. Twice they told me that. Just leave your guy behind. No, I don't think so. So I was enraged by this. Get on the plane. We get a text from a reporter who somehow knew that this had happened. I have no idea how. I had no interest in publicizing it, actually. There was, a long trail that showed that the U.S. Embassy had been coordinating against us in a public relations battle before we even got there. They were leaking that we demanded to do it at the airport because we were afraid to go into Israel. We're cowards. Okay, we're cowards. Right. And so I just said to the reporter by text, they pulled my guys into a room, interrogating them. This is outrageous, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The interesting thing is I never heard from Huckabee or anybody to this moment from the U.S. Embassy about what security did to my producers. They didn't ask us. And instead, Huckabee went out and called me a liar. So it raises, again, the question, who exactly is Huckabee working for? We're American citizens in a foreign country. He's our ambassador. He represents our country. We pay his salary, but he's taking the side of the foreign government without even calling to say, hey, what happened to you at the airport? Did you get hassled? Did your guys get hassled? No. He just immediately repeats their lies without even consulting us. So, what are we looking at here? We're looking at the reality, which is if you're an American in Israel, you can be certain that your government will take the side of the Israeli government and not your side. And really, is that so different from the experience of Americans in the United States? Can you be sure that your government will take your side over the Israeli government? No, of course not. They will always take the Israeli government's side over yours. And that's the core problem. Even if you support a war with Iran, I think the most pressing issue for Americans is that we kill the Ayatollah or whatever. You still have a fair expectation that your government, because it is yours, you pay for it, it exists to serve you, and for no other reason, you have an expectation that your government will take your side against a foreign government. But the daily lived reality, the obvious truth, visible to every single American, is that's the opposite of reality. In fact, if you criticize Israel in your country, your government will work to censor you. If there's a standoff between you and Bibi, you know whose side your government's going to take, Bibi's side. That is not sustainable. That is too humiliating. It's too clearly an inversion of the natural order. Your government exists for you, not for a foreign government. But that's not how we live in this country or in Israel. So that's what we learned. And one last thing. The Israelis apparently went, probably with the help of Mike Huckabee, went to the surveillance tape inside the diplomatic terminal and pulled some clip. And they're, of course, getting all their little bots online to promote it, of me with my arm around somebody to show that actually I'm lying about what happened. That person was our driver who drove us from the plane to the terminal, a short drive. Very nice guy, good guy, Israeli guy. And right when we arrived, and he said, could I get a picture? Of course. He's a nice man. So I just put my arm around him, took a picture. That's what that is. That was before the interview. It was before our producers were hassled by the thugs and asked ridiculous questions. It was before any of this happened. So that's just another installment of the propaganda war. Thought we'd give you the backstory on that. People seem to be more inflamed, not just emotionally, but physically, and more tired than ever. And food is part of the reason. Bad food. Ugh. Tastes good, but not good for you. For most of human history, people ate actual food, stuff that your body recognizes, but now you eat a ton of chemicals. Paleo Valley is the solution to this. Paleo Valley's bone broth protein is made from, 100% grass-fed and finished beef bones. That's it. No fillers, no additives, no weird industrial byproducts. It's actual food turned into something you can consume every day. Most people use it the way we do. You blend it into a smoothie or coffee. The chocolate flavor is top tier. It actually tastes awesome. They also have vanilla and salted caramel. Plus, they make a savory original turmeric ginger and an unflavored version you stir into soup, rice, or even just mix with hot water and drink like bone broth. You could do any of those things or all of them. Americans use Paleo Valley to support joints, digestion, recovery. Paleo Valley verifies sourcing and tests for pesticide, and that does matter. You don't want to drink pesticide, that you probably do inadvertently. If you want to add something genuinely useful to your diet, visit paleovalley.com and use the code Tucker for checkout. 20% off your first order if you do that. That's paleovalley.com, code Tucker for 20% off. So with that, here is our interview with Ambassador Mike Huckabee. I hope it's informative. Ambassador, thank you very much for having us, for inviting me. I was grateful to be invited.
Well, thank you.
I was grateful because I don't like all the name calling. I've engaged in some of it. I want to apologize for that. In general, I don't think people should be going immediately to motive, calling each other Nazis or anti-Semites. I said I hate the Christian Zionists. I lost control of myself. Of course I don't. I've apologized for that. I have problems with my anger, and so I just want to apologize to you since you are a Christian Zionist.
You and I have known each other for over 30 years.
Over 30 years. That is totally true.
Back when you were in Little Rock. So
yes. You know, the newspaper.
It's why I wanted us to have a conversation, talk to each other and not about each other. And I appreciate very much your coming here to.
Of course. And I'm only staying a couple hours, unfortunately, because I kind of shoehorned this in, but I hope that I will be back soon. And I hope that I can come back soon because I actually like, despite what you may hear, I actually like the country. I've been here a lot and there are a lot of things I love about it. And I want to talk to people in it for like a week.
Good.
And get a better sense of it. So I want to ask you, everyone I've talked to in preparation for this has said the same thing. Jonathan Pollard, I'm just going to throw the name to you and have you explain.
No, I'm glad you asked. You know,
of course.
Interestingly, there's been a lot of things about it. You're the first person who has asked me about it, which I find amazing. So I'm glad you did.
Really?
Yeah, the very first
Good.
person.
Well, it's better to hear it.
Sure. I met Jonathan Pollard 2 times. Once I was making a speech in Jerusalem. This has been a few years ago. His wife was still alive at the time, and he was there. And someone introduced me to him and his wife. I said hello to them. That was it. Hi. Nice to meet Esther, his wife, and that was it. I went and made my speech, and I left. Later, his wife passed away here in Israel. And I sent him a note and just said, I'm sorry to hear about your wife. I remember meeting her at the hotel and sorry to hear it. He then asked, could he come and see me? He wanted to come and thank me for being kind to him. He came to the embassy. I think we met for maybe 30 minutes. We had a nice, pleasant visit. The funny thing was the New York Times reported that it was a secret meeting. Tucker, if you've ever been to the U.S. Embassy, you would know there's no such thing as a secret meeting at the U.S. Embassy.
Sure.
There are cameras everywhere. You walk through Marines, you walk through security, you walk through the front office, and there's a dozen or more people that are going to check you out when you come. And before you get there, you're going to have to give us your passport information. You're going to have to be vetted and screened and all of this stuff. So the idea that it was secret was ludicrous. The whole idea is, look, Jonathan Pollard did something that was terribly wrong. He sold secrets. He shouldn't have done it. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison and spent 30, actually was, I think he was sentenced to maybe more than 30 years, but he spent 30 years in prison. Most people convicted of something similar, which was one count, I believe, would have spent 2 to 4, but he spent 30. I don't have a problem with him spending 30 because I think what he did was despicable. I'm not defending anything about what he did. But even people like the former director of the CIA, a number of other senators on the Senate Foreign Relations of the Senate Intel Committee said that he should be allowed to leave and move to Israel if he wanted to. So it, to me, was not as big a deal that I had this basically courtesy meeting. He wanted to thank me for being nice to him when his wife died. That's pretty much the story.
You advocated for his release when you ran for, I remember it, in 2011, long before he had served 30 years. And I agree with you that there are a lot of people languishing in prison, in our country and in this country, in many countries, for longer periods than they deserve. And I think it's a Christian impulse to want to see them free. But this was the greatest traitor in modern American history, who sold our battle plans against the Soviet Union, our main enemy in the Cold War, to the Israeli government, which, according to our Reagan CIA director, Bill Casey, then gave them to the Soviet Union. So this was the most profound betrayal of the United States in my lifetime. Why advocate for that guy's release before he serves his full sentence?
If that were the case in 2011, it would have been because I had a number of friends that suggested that he had more than served time, and he didn't want to live in the U.S. anymore. He wanted to live in Israel. And but my association with him, again, I had never met him until I met him in Jerusalem at a hotel. That was the first time I had ever encountered him.
I'm friends with 1 million bad people, or I've talked to 1 million bad people.
I'm sitting here with you. Right. I mean, come on.
Jesus ain't with tax collectors. So trust me, do not judge people who are friends or know or enjoy the company of immoral people, because it's not an endorsement of their immoral behavior. Pollard is different, I think, once you become U.S. ambassador, the representative of the President of the United States in the United States of America in a foreign country, and then you invite not only the most damaging betrayer in our lifetimes, but also a guy who continues to advocate for betrayal. So he gave an interview, as I know you know, in 2021 to Israeli media, in which he said, I would encourage Jewish Americans with security clearances to spy for Mossad against their own country, the United States, because, and I'm pretty much quoting him, all Jews should have dual loyalty. Mm-hmm. That's not repentance. That's not someone who feels bad about what he did. That's someone who's encouraging American Jews to betray their country. That's pretty heavy, don't you think?
Oh, I do. And I disagree with that wholeheartedly. I think, let's remember, it was President Trump who probably facilitated his departure. And I'm certainly supportive of President Trump. I think you are. And
Pollard's not. He called him a madman after your meeting.
That's why I say Pollard is not, for me, the real issue. It was the fact that he did something that was despicable. I'm not denying that. Of course he did. And he paid dearly for it, 30 years in prison, and he should have. That's what he should have done. There's no question about that.
But why meet with him in the U.S. Embassy? Your colleagues said they were shocked. They said...
Who were the colleagues that said they were shocked?
Quoted on background in the New York Times. I think the meeting was in August. This could all be fake. That's why I'm asking you.
Well, the same New York Times said it was a secret meeting. And I'm telling you, there's no such thing as a secret meeting in the U.S. Embassy.
Do you see why the U.S. ambassador hosting a convicted betrayer of his own country who's encouraging Americans to continue to betray their country would seem shocking?
Well, I would say that it wasn't that you make it sound like I'm hosting a meeting. I simply met with him. I meet with people all the time.
Some of them just walk in without a...
No, they have to have an appointment. Of course they do.
Oh, so it is hosting him then, I think.
Well, I don't know if it was hosting, but it was certainly, he was able to come to the U.S. Embassy to have a meeting at his request. I did. And frankly, I don't regret it. I met with a lot of people over the course of the time I've been here, and we'll meet with a lot more. That's it.
So if you spend the evening at my house, you are guaranteed to find yourself in a conversation about the Hallow app. We talked about it this morning. It is the best prayer app ever. This Lent, Hallow's Pray 40 Challenge invites users to step out of the noise of everyday life and dive into something much deeper, the parable of the prodigal son. It's a story about a man who leaves home, wastes everything, hits rock bottom, and then realizes something transformative. He can go back. And when he does go back, he's not punished, he's welcomed, he's celebrated. That story tells the truth that no matter how far you have gone, you can still turn around. You're responsible for your next choice, even if you've behaved in deeply unholy ways, and we all have. Mercy still awaits you. This Easter, Hallow's Pray 40 Challenge is the best way to stay in touch with the Word of God, the good word. The challenge begins Wednesday, February 18th, and runs through Easter. Get 3 months free at hallow.com/Tucker. It's the best. There have been Americans in prison in Israel. There have also been, and there continue to be, dozens and dozens and dozens of sex offenders, accused sex offenders from the United States who fled to Israel, including one recently, an Israeli government official who was caught trying to molest a 15-year-old girl and fled to Israel and is not going back to the United States to stand charges for attempted molestation of a child. Have you advocated for the Israeli government to return him to the United States?
I'm not familiar with that case. It has not come to us at the embassy. So I'm not aware. Is this the person in Nevada?
That is correct.
Okay, I
in
heard
Clark
about
County, I would imagine so.
Yeah, I heard about it, but I heard about it through open source media. It was never something that was presented to us, but I would have no problem with him being extradited back to the U.S.
You're the president's and our country's representative in the state of Israel, so I think it would fall to you to advocate with your friend, the prime minister, to say, wait a second, we have a very close relationship. We're obviously the single largest source of outside funding for this country. How can you take an accused child molester and shield him from American justice, send him back to the United States? Have you ever had that conversation?
No, because the prime minister would not be the proper person
that may be
in
right.
Israel.
Pardon my ignorance. But
that would deal with an extradition. It would go through their court system. And so the prime minister is separate, very similar to what we have in the U.S., where there is a separation of powers. So it would go through something other than the prime minister.
Have you advocated to the courts, to judges, to anybody in the Israeli justice system?
There has never been a request for me to engage in that. I would be happy to do it if the White House sent a message to me. I do work for the president. I serve at his pleasure. If anyone at the White House were to say to me, would you please go and make a case for it? But probably if that were to happen, it wouldn't come through the embassy as much as it would likely come from the Department of Justice at the U.S. in D.C. They would make the request. They might involve us, but they very likely would not.
Does it seem strange to you that people accused of child molestation in the United States are allowed to have refuge within the borders of our closest ally? How that doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I would say that
if you've molested an American child, shouldn't you be required to stand justice?
It's an allegation. Let's be clear. One of the things about our system of jurisprudence, you're innocent until you're proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. So if the charges are there, should he be extradited? I would say so.
The charges are there.
Yeah. Okay. So they should be, but that's a Justice Department decision, and they're the ones who should be pursuing it. To my knowledge, they haven't. They certainly haven't engaged the U.S. Embassy over it.
Why would the Israeli government harbor fugitives from justice in the United States?
I'm not sure that
there are dozens and dozens and dozens.
Dozens.
In fact, there's an Israeli group that keeps track of them that is dedicated, Jewish Israeli group dedicated to combating the molestation of children, and keeps a long list. And then you can look it up. And
Tucker, I hope you're not saying that you think the Israelis support the molestation of children.
Obviously, I'm not saying that.
Okay,
I'm saying that the Israeli government shields accused child molesters from justice in the United States.
I'm not sure I could say that that's something that is provable. I don't know. But I am not aware that the Israeli government is shielding people.
You obviously want to sleep well and fashionably. Brooklyn Bedding can help. Here at TCN, we take sleep time seriously, try to get 8 hours. And a lot of the people here cannot help rave about their Brooklyn Bedding mattress. The first thing you'll notice about your mattress is how stable they feel. That's because they're built to last for decades, not just years. It's American durability. By the way, when we bring in a new advertiser, we have them send stuff to the whole staff and people test it. And they love this. Brooklyn Bedding's founder built the company here in the United States from the ground up. Craftsmanship, grit, no college degree. Their factory is in Arizona. The prices are low despite the fact they're American made. High-end comfort without the high-end price. What makes these mattresses so great? Brooklyn Bedding uses copper-infused foams and thermoregulation coated foams to help keep you cool and comfortable all night. Plus, they offer a 120-night sleep trial. That's plenty of time to make sure you love it, and we're confident you will. Visit brooklynbedding.com. Use the promo code Tucker at checkout to get 30% off site-wide. It's not available anywhere else, only on this show. So take advantage while you can. Visit brooklynbedding.com, promo code Tucker.
Well, they are, and I'll give you and I just want to make sure that I pronounce this man's name correctly. It's Tom, I believe, Alexandrovich?
I think that's right, and I've written it down, but of course my handwriting is so terrible I can't read it. But yes, he is an Israeli, I believe, cybersecurity official who was at a conference in Las Vegas last year and was caught up in a sting designed to catch people soliciting sex from children. He was one of a number of people arrested for this. He was arraigned and charged. And then 2 days later, he fled to Israel and did his first hearing by Zoom. He was allowed for some reason to leave for a foreign country, having already been charged for a attempted molestation of a child. And he remains here now. And there have been many news stories about this. And I just wonder if you would ask the Israeli government to put him on a plane and send him back to face justice for attempting to molest an American child. It doesn't seem complicated.
No, I wouldn't mind doing that, but I want to find out if the Justice Department of the U.S. has already sought to extradite him. Is there anything in process? I don't know.
Why wouldn't they seek to extradite him?
I have no idea. That's a question for the Justice Department.
I have many questions for the Justice Department, like why are millions of Epstein files still classified? Why do you think that is?
I have no idea. I haven't kept up with that. I've never met the man. I don't know him.
You haven't kept up with the Epstein disclosure?
I mean, only from a distance. I'm 6,000 miles away from D.C. these days, and I'm pretty sure that there's so much going on.
The current president of Israel, who I know you know, President Herzog,
Know him very well.
apparently was at Pedo Island. That's what it says in the disclosures. And of course, we know that the former prime minister, Ehud Barak, was living on and off at Epstein's house. So still living high-level Israeli officials are directly implicated in Epstein's life, if not his crime. So I would think that you'd be following this.
Only I was not aware that there was any connection with President Herzog. I would be surprised to hear that. And knew there was about the former prime minister, who apparently had a lot of dealings with Epstein.
Business dealings. And by the way, I'm not alleging anything, but I mean, it's in the Epstein files. And I don't know that I've heard the current president of Israel respond to it, but he is listed as a visitor to Pedo Island. So that's kind of a big deal. I wonder, considering there are so many suggestions in the files, as I'm sure you know, of sexual abuse, and given that Jeffrey Epstein was a convicted sex offender, I wonder why the administration you work for would be holding millions of files, which I believe belong to the public, hidden for, quote, national security reasons. What would those national security reasons be, do you think?
Honestly, I think you've probably got more access to the White House sometimes than I do. You should ask them.
Well, but you're the government official representing that White House.
In Israel. And I represent the U.S. in Israel to the Israeli government from the U.S. government. But honestly, nobody has presented that to us.
Well, now that you know that
we have a pretty dynamic situation here. I don't know if you know that or not, but there's a lot going on in this part of the world. And frankly, that has not been top line item.
But you're surprised to hear that the current president of Israel, whom you know, is listed as a visitor to Pedo Island.
Had never heard that. Never heard it even in the Israeli press.
Are you going to ask him next time you see him?
I'll be happy to. Talk to him almost every week.
I guess what I'm asking is not simply as a representative of my government or a high U.S. official, but just as like a man and a father and a Christian. How could you resist saying, like, were you on Pedo Island with Jeffrey Epstein?
Well, if I'm not aware of it. And secondly, there are a lot of things that go on in the world. I don't question every single person about every single thing that may be alleged
of the
about.
Country.
I understand all that, but this is the first I've ever heard of this. So why do you expect me to have knowledge of something like that?
Well, because you attacked me personally for suggesting that Jeffrey Epstein had ties to Mossad, and you said that.
You think he does?
What's very clear he does from the files.
You think he does? Where do you get that?
Well, the fact that he was in contact repeatedly with members of the Israeli government, including the current president and the former prime minister, and all kinds of Israeli intel-connected people. I'm not saying he worked for Mossad. I don't think we know that. But there's no question that he had extensive contact with CIA.
But I think you said it, a turning point event. Everybody knows Jeffrey Epstein.
I said everyone thinks. And it turns out everyone was right, that he did have.
I'm not sure everyone was right or everyone thinks.
Okay, but you said that I was lying, and I don't want to make this about me.
I don't think I said you were lying, Tucker. I don't recall.
I'm just saying, why don't we release all the files, and then we don't need to guess?
I got no problem with that. Go ahead.
Would you call on it? Well, because you weighed in on it and said that this was not true, when of course...
I said there was no evidence.
Well, there's quite a bit of evidence, but you haven't apparently bothered to read any of the files. Is that what you're saying?
I have not read the Epstein files. Apparently you have.
Well, they're on the internet.
But when you say that that everybody knows that Jeffrey Epstein was a Mossad agent.
That everyone believes that.
I don't think everybody does. I don't know.
Well, everyone knows that he had contact with, and by the way, not just Israeli intelligence, American intelligence, which is much more distressing for me. I'm not Israeli, I'm American. I don't want my government having any contact with someone like Jeffrey Epstein. So the shame
I wouldn't either.
is on the United States, as far as I'm concerned, just to be totally clear about that. Everyone's very sensitive about the Israel connection, not at all sensitive about the U.S. connection, which I find very revealing. We should care about what our government does first, I think. But since you weighed in on it and said there's no evidence, I'm surprised that since that evidence has been open to the public for a month, since you've already weighed in publicly on this question, that you've made no effort to evaluate that evidence. Why is that?
I just told you I was certainly not aware that there were some specific allegations. I knew about the former prime minister, but I don't know him. I'm not sure I ever met him in my many times. You know, I've been to Israel over 100 times since 1973. The first time I came here was 1973, July. And that's almost 53 years of coming and going to this country. So I know the country well. I know a lot of people here, but I don't know everything and I don't know everybody, but I do a lot of people.
Of course. No. And I can see your love for it. And I think that's great. But I'm talking about the U.S. government and its responsibility to, there's a lot of complaint about conspiracy theories and everyone, he's a hater. Everyone's assigning motive. But there's a way to end these conversations very quickly with facts. And I'm highly confused by...
Have you brought this up to the president?
No, I don't work for him. I've said this many times.
I know you don't work for him, but you go to the White House and you see people there. You and J.D. Vance are very good friends. So have you brought this up to them? Because
I have brought this up in public many times.
It's not on my portfolio, but apparently it's very strongly on your mind. And I'm
child
just thinking you should
molestation is a significant concern for me.
Well, it should be for everybody. But if
there is a charged child molester.
But I'm saying if you are very involved in the details of this,
I'm not.
And you think it's the U.S. government that's hiding and shielding somebody, then bring it up to the people that you personally know.
I don't think that. I know it because the Justice Department has said we have millions of documents we're not releasing.
Why are they not releasing them?
I'm asking you as a U.S. government official.
Well, but
what the answer?
A government official at the embassy in Jerusalem that has not one thing to do with the Justice Department and what they're investigating on any given day.
Again,
unless it involves...
And I don't want to argue or talk in circles, but you were the one who brought it up and said it's absolutely not true.
I was only responding to what I heard you say.
Okay, but now that you know there's evidence and we can settle this debate, you haven't looked at the evidence and you're not pushing for the release of the total corpus of evidence. And I'm confused because I want to believe that your goal is to get to the truth, and the fastest way to do that is by releasing the evidence. Don't you think?
You suggest that I can release the evidence?
I'm suggesting that you could call for it right now.
Well, fine, call for it. Let's have it all open. I thought it was being all opened up for everything I know.
Once it's open, I hope you'll read it because it's really interesting, and then it puts to rest a lot of the debate, and it ends the name calling because we can say, here it is right there. And we don't have to call people names. We can just assess the documents. Let me ask you.
But you bring it up. I hope you will bring it up to people at the White House.
I'm bringing it up right now. I'm bringing it up now. And I'm asking, I just want to say this one last time, as the U.S. ambassador to Israel, I hope that you will make a formal request to the Israeli government to send every accused sex offender in this country back to the United States to face justice. And I don't understand why that hasn't been done. I'm confused.
Well, we'll try to clear up all the confusion that we have.
Well, if someone's been accused of trying to molest a child, I think it's...
Then certainly, and I'll check with the Justice Department because it is a DOJ issue and it would be handled through DOJ, the U.S., to the court systems in Israel. That's how it would be handled.
But the first step is the Israeli government saying, yes, we will allow you to extradite this person back. The person is being shielded by the government. That's why the person's here. That's why he fled here, so he wouldn't have to stand trial for trying to molest a child. I want to get to as I said at the outset, I said something awful that I regret that my wife barked at me about. I lashed out at Christian Zionists and evangelicals, and I just want to say again that I'm sorry. I've always liked them because they're pro-life and they're also really nice people. So for the third time, I'm sorry that I said that. I think part of my problem was I don't understand the theology, and you are not a fake Baptist minister. You're an actual minister. You had a church for many years. You're an actual theologian. So, and I mean this with sincerity, I hear people say, those who bless Israel will be blessed. I know it's a reference to Genesis. I don't understand the connection between that concept and modern Israel and the geopolitical world. And so I'm going to stand back and
well,
ask
let's first define, because, from my days as a debater in high school and college, one of the things I knew, you didn't start the debate till you defined the terms.
Amen.
Let's define the terms.
Thank you.
What is,
Thank you.
What is a Christian Zionist?
Okay.
What does that mean to you? What does it mean?
I don't know. It's the people who call me a Nazi for asking what Israel means. I mean, that's kind of I don't even know.
But here's the point. If you say a Christian Zionist is a person who has a brain virus and is guilty of heresy, that's a pretty big charge.
I know. I shouldn't have made it. I made it out of anger and ignorance.
So,
and I'm
Christian, I think we can agree, is somebody who follows Jesus Christ.
Exactly.
Has a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, believes in his death, burial, resurrection, has repented of one's sins, and have accepted him as one's Savior. Would that be fair?
Amen.
Christian. Define that. Zionist. A Zionist simply means a person who believes that the Jewish people have a right to have a homeland where they have security and safety. Did you believe that the Jews have a right to live in Israel? Do you believe that Jews have a right to live in Israel? That would be a Zionist. That's all a Zionist is.
I have a million questions about what all of those terms mean.
Yeah.
But conceptually, I wish Israel no harm. I don't want to see them
You want them to have a place where they can live with safety and security?
So I saw this recently in an extremely telling exchange between the lieutenant governor of Texas, who I know and I've always liked, and a woman I don't know, never met, who's on the Religious Liberty Commission or something. And she said, I'm a Catholic, but I'm not a Zionist. And they had this ferocious exchange. And he kept saying, and everyone on the panel seemed to keep saying, you have to believe in Israel's right to exist, which I've never kind of questioned, just for the record, but it did raise two questions I think are really important, and I hope you'll answer them. One is, where does that right come from?
I would say it comes from, essentially, you could say it comes from the Bible. I would say that it does. But it comes also from a long iteration of historical precedents going to the Balfour Declaration of 1917. It comes from the League of Nations 1927. It comes from the United Nations 1947,
right.
The Declaration of Independence of the Israel State in May of 1948. They were immediately attacked. They won the war. They were attacked again in 1956. They won the war. They were attacked again in 1967 by 5 countries. They won the war. They were attacked again in 1973 in the Yom Kippur War. They won the war. The point is, does Israel have a right to exist? They also had wars in 1982 in Lebanon. They've had intifadas, 2 of those. They've had
Lebanon again in 06. I was there. No, I'm very familiar with the modern history of the state.
Okay.
Pretty familiar, I think. And I've been
But
here.
a Zionist simply means somebody who believes that Israel has a right to exist. Now, the question is, do you believe Israel has a right to exist?
I guess. I mean, I want Israel to exist. Well, no, but I want to know what that means. So, like, do other countries have a right to exist?
Well, they do exist.
Do they have a right to exist? You keep saying Israel has a right to exist, and I want to know what other countries have a right.
They have a legal right, because every international body in the last 100 years has said the Jewish people have a right to their indigenous homeland.
My question
so that's a legal right.
What other?
Do they have a biblical right? I would say that yes, but you may say they don't.
I don't know. I'm actually sincerely interested in finding out what you mean by a biblical right. But first, to the legal right, does any other country on the planet have the same right that Israel has to exist?
Well, you could say, does Jordan have a right to exist? When it was Transjordan and the Brits came and divided up the Middle East, and they gave some land to Jordanians, and they gave some land to the Saudis, and they gave some land to various Middle Eastern countries, and it was all carved up. And the French gave Lebanon its right to exist. Do they have a right to exist?
Do they?
Well, why not?
Okay. Every country.
Does the U.S. have a right to exist?
I'm asking you.
Okay, and I'm telling you, I think the U.S. has a right to exist.
Okay.
We came here. We came there. We're in Israel now talking. But does the U.S. have a right to exist? Does anyone question whether we have a right to exist?
Yeah, but of course, I'm for America,
Good for you.
But so every current country on the map has the same right to exist that Israel has. Is that what you're saying?
I think what we're saying is that when a country has established itself and it is following international law, it has been deemed by numerous bodies that it is indigenous to its homeland, as Israel is. This is its homeland. It goes back 3,800 years to the time of Abraham. It's not that the Jewish people just showed up here in 1948 and said, we're going to have some land.
Hold on. So those are two different tracks, and I just want to make sure that we separate them so I understand each one separately.
All right.
So you're saying there's the modern legal framework, and so you said a country that abides by international law has a right to exist.
I would say that is a part of its existence.
Would the inverse be true that a country that does not abide by international law forfeits its right to exist?
Not necessarily if it has the capacity to stay and make its case known. But there have been Jewish people in this land,
okay, but that's
in this very land, for 3,800 years.
Okay. So, but you're saying as the modern nation state with borders and a military and a Knesset and just all the kind of trappings of a modern country, all of which I support, that country has, every country on the planet has the same right as Israel to exist because it does exist. Is that what you're saying? I'm just trying to understand the concept here.
Well, I think what we're trying to get to is Christian Zionism, and you've taken this way off the road here.
I don't know that I have. I don't mean to. Christian Zionism is a separate thing, but I just keep hearing people say Zionism is the belief
but that's the fundamental argument that's going on. Does Israel have a right to live in their indigenous, ancient, historical land, a land that has been affirmed throughout international organizations, a land that has direct ties to the Jewish people?
I just want to know if this is a universal principle. I guess that's what I'm getting at, because if it's not, then it's meaningless to me, because as a Christian, I believe in universal principles. Something is right for everyone or it's wrong for everyone. We don't believe in special cases.
But here's the question. If the Jews didn't have this land, would the Jews have a right to any land?
I don't know. I'm not attacking the Jews. I'm asking if this applies to every people in every nation. Does every nation have the same right to its own homeland, to its own physical land that you say Israel does?
I feel like we're in a rabbit hole here.
No, I think it's a very straightforward question. No, but does that right extend to other countries other than Israel?
But the most important thing that is going on in our culture right now is whether or not the people that are yelling in the streets from the river to the sea, whether that's a legitimate point of view to say that there should not be a Jewish homeland. There should not be a Jewish
You'll
state.
never hear me say
period.
that. I just want to know.
I know you haven't said it, but that's the argument.
It's one of the arguments going on globally. And the United States, excuse me, has a pretty narrow view, I would say, in our media culture, of what's happening around the world. There are plenty of countries having this debate. Stonehenge is a lot older than the first temple in Israel. And it was built by the same people who live there now. It's the same people. And they are being pushed off their island and outnumbered by people from other places. And so in Great Britain, in Ireland, which is also a country with a nation of people, a race, if you will, that is being displaced, replaced.
Who are they being replaced by?
Immigrants.
Okay.
From other places.
I just wanted to clarify because I was one of the...
Well, just as a demographic matter, it's just like you can look at the numbers. It's not controversial. Just look at the numbers. There'll be a minority in their country. And their people have been there longer than Jews have been in Israel. Yeah. And so they're having this debate too. That's all I'm saying. And lots of places are having this debate.
Sure.
So does that principle apply to everyone, or is it specific just to Israel?
I think it applies specifically to Israel. It applies to anyone who can prove that they have some connection to the land and connection to the history and connection to international law. But Israel, I think, does have an extraordinary...
international law. So if, again...
Well, no, but let me finish this,
yes,
Tucker, because here's the point. We're talking about Christian Zionism. The idea that as a Christian, I believe in both the Old and the New Testament. Why wouldn't I? I'm a person of the book. There are 80 million evangelical Christians in the United States. What makes us who we are is our adherence to the Scripture, our belief that the Bible, all of it, not part of it, but all of it, is the Word of the living God.
Yeah.
So if I believe in the Old and the New Testament, I do believe that there is a very specific call to the Jewish people that started with Abraham And he called him out of what is now modern day Iraq, said, come where I send you. He came. This is the land. Genesis 12:3. He says, I will bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you. In Genesis 17, he looks out at the world. He says, look, and this is where I'm giving you the land.